I want to thank the Senator from New Mexico. Madam President,
The senator from Illinois.
when it comes to understanding the influence of big money donors on congressional and presidential campaigns, the numbers don't lie. In 2012, the top 32 donors to super PACs spent as much money as every single small donation to President Obama and Governor Romney combined. The top 32 donors to super PACs spent as much money as every single small donation to President Obama and Governor Romney combined. That means 32 individuals contributed as much as 3.7 million Americans. In 2012, candidates for both the House and Senate raised the majority of their funds from large donations of $1,000 or more. 40% of all contributions to Senate candidates came from donors who maxed out at the $2,500 contribution limit, representing just 0.02% of the American population. The amount of money that special interest lobbyists, wealthy donors, corporations, and super PACs are willing to spend to shape policy has grown exponentially since Citizens United, and it's expected to increase. This dramatic increase in spending tells us that special interests are not going to be shy about Congress. If you vote against our interest, we'll spend millions to make sure you never get a chance to vote again. That's a terrible reality for many members of Congress who are trying to make honest decisions about policy. It's an even worse statement about our democracy. I think it's time for fundamental reform for the way we finance congressional elections. We need a system that allows candidates to focus on their constituents, their districts, and their states instead of fundraising. We need a system that encourages ordinary Americans, the candidates I call mere mortals, to make their voice heard with small, affordable donations to candidates of their choice. That's why I'm introducing the Fair Elections Now Act. The Fair Elections Now Act will dramatically change the way campaigns are financed in America. This bill lets candidates focus on the people they represent, regardless of whether these people have wealth or whether they're going to attend big money fundraisers. Fair elections candidates would be in the policy business, regardless of what policies are preferred by the special interest. I want to thank Senators Boxer, Brown, Cardin, Franken, Gillibrand, Harkin, Heinrich, Klobuchar, Leahy, Markey, Menendez, Merkley, Murphy, Sanders, Shaheen, and Warren for joining me in this effort. The Fair Elections Now Act will help restore public confidence in congressional elections. It provides qualified candidates for Congress with grants, matching funds, and vouchers from the Fair Elections Fund to replace campaign fundraising that now relies largely on lobbyists, wealthy donors, corporations, and other special interests. In return, participating candidates would agree to limit their campaign spending to amounts raised from small dollar donors plus the amounts provided from the Fair Elections Fund. There are 3 stages for Senate candidates under this bill. To participate, candidates would first need to prove their viability by raising a minimum and an amount of small dollar qualifying contributions from in-state donors. Once a candidate qualifies, that candidate must limit the amount raised from each donor to $150 per election. For the primary, participants would receive a base grant that would vary in amount based on the population of the state that the candidate seeks to represent. Participants would also receive a 6-to-1 match for small dollar donations up to a defined matching cap. The candidate could raise an unlimited amount of $150 contributions if needed to compete against high-spending opponents. For the general election, qualified candidates would receive an additional grant, further small dollar matching, and vouchers for purchasing TV advertising. The candidate could continue to raise an unlimited amount of $150 contributions if needed. Instead of spending so much time courting donors and super PACs, fair election candidates would have an incentive to spend their time with the middle-class Americans that they want to represent. Candidates would have an incentive to seek small donations, and citizens would have an incentive to donate. Under fair elections, the average citizen would know their small donation of $150 would be converted to a $900 donation through the 6-to-1 fair elections match. They'd also be eligible for a refundable tax credit. The Fair Elections Now Act would establish the My Voice tax credit to encourage individuals to make small donations to campaigns. The maximum refundable amount for the tax credit would be $25 for individuals, $50 for joint filers. To ensure the tax credit targets small donors, it is only available to individuals who do not contribute more than $300 to a candidate or political party in any given year. Madam President, our country faces major challenges. Everybody knows we need to reduce the deficit, modernize our energy policy, create good-paying jobs, reform the tax code, and many other things. What many people may not know is that at every turn there are high-powered special interests fighting each and every one of these proposals. It's difficult for members of Congress not to pay attention to the concerns of these special interests when the members have to turn and raise money for their own campaigns. This bill would change the whole ballgame. It would reduce the influence of these special interest lobbyists and wealthy donors. As a result, the bill would enhance the voice of average Americans. Let me be clear. I honestly believe that the overwhelming majority of the people serving in political life are good, honest people. And I believe that senators and congressmen are guided by the best of intentions. But we are stuck in a terrible system. The perception is that politicians are corrupted because of all the big money we each have to raise. And whether it's true or not, that perception and the loss of trust that goes with it makes it incredibly difficult for the senators to solve tough problems. That's why so many Americans have Congress in such low regard. This problem, the perception of pervasive corruption, is fundamental to our democracy, and we need to address it. Fair elections is not a far-fetched idea. Fair election systems are already at work in cities and states around America. Similar programs exist and are working well in jurisdictions throughout the country, from Maine to Arizona. These programs are bringing new faces and new ideas into politics, making more races more competitive, dramatically reducing the influence of special interest. The vast majority of Americans agree it's time to fundamentally change the way we finance political campaigns. Recent polling shows that 75% of Democrats, 66% of independents, and 55% of Republicans support fair election style reform. The Fair Elections Now Act is supported by numerous good government groups, former members of Congress from both parties, prominent business leaders, and even some lobbyists. Everyone's entitled to a seat at the table, but no one's entitled to a special seat, or maybe a seat. The Fair Elections Now Act will reform our campaign finance system so members of Congress can focus on implementing policies in the best interest of the people that sent them to Washington. Madam President, you just finished a campaign, and I know from visiting with you in your home state, you worked hard. And I'm in the midst of a re-election campaign myself. And I know that I'm working hard, and a lot of time is being spent on the telephone, raising money from a lot of generous people. I say in politics there are the millionaires and the mere mortals. I'm in the second category. And that means I can't write a check to cover the cost of a campaign. I have to hope that enough people want to support me in my effort. And with those contributions, I will be buying media, primarily television, radio, internet advertising, some mailings, paying for a headquarters and volunteers. It's expensive in a big state like Wisconsin or Illinois. Now we're in the Citizens United era where the traditional campaigns that I've just described are frankly not even close to the reality of what candidates face. One senator, one incumbent Democratic senator now, up for re-election, has had over $8 million spent against her in her home state with negative advertising that's gone on for months. For months. It's being paid for by some very wealthy billionaires. These billionaires, in this case the Koch brothers, spent, I believe, $248 million of their own money in the last election cycle. They are, in fact, a political party to themselves. They decide the candidates they support, which coincidentally are all in the other political party, and they invest huge sums of money in those election efforts. Make no mistake, we're raising money on the Democratic side too, but not nearly to the numbers that we see on the other side. This business of politics is being swamped with money in amounts and levels we have never seen before. What it means is that if an incumbent or even a challenger wants to have a viable campaign, they spend more and more time raising money if they can't write a personal check to cover it. And most of us can't. And so instead of being back in my state, working on issues that are important in the Senate, you spend a lot of time fundraising. We've become so used to it, it's like the frog in that pot of water on the stove that may not sense the increase in temperature until the water's boiling and it's too late. We're in that same predicament here. We are watching election after election the cost of campaigns go through the roof. It discourages good people from engaging in the political process. It makes small contributors feel like they're such small peanuts that nobody even notices. We have to change that whole concept. I'm reluctant to say this, but so far this campaign finance reform bill is only being co-sponsored and sponsored by members of one political party. I have tried for years to get Republican support for campaign finance reform. The only Republican senator who would ever join me was Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania, who ultimately changed political parties on me, and I shouldn't say not on me, but changed political parties, and then I didn't have bipartisan sponsorship. But the point I'm getting to is this should be a bipartisan issue. I have no doubt that in a limited campaign with limited expenditures, I'd still have enough money to get my message out in Illinois, and I'm sure my opponent would too. That would be a godsend in sparing me and whoever from raising a lot of money, and a relief to the voters who get sick and tired of the political advertising that swamps the screens in the closing days of a campaign. Fair Elections Now is an effort to move in that direction. It's a new concept, but it's one we should look at honestly. We can clean up the election campaigns in America. We can be responsive to the constituents. We can further the goals of our democracy and do it in a fashion that is affordable and allows mere mortals to compete. Madam President, I yield the floor.